The locals in my grandmother's small Appalachian town didn't talk about the whistling after dark, but every child knew the unspoken rule. If you hear whistling at night, close your curtains and don't look outside, no matter how familiar the tune might sound. I was 12 when I first visited that summer. A city kid dropped into the rural foothills where cell service disappeared, and night actually meant darkness. The kind of darkness that has weight and texture, that presses against your windows like a living thing. "Don't you worry about bears or anything out here?" I asked my grandmother the first evening, as she methodically locked each window despite the July heat. Her hands paused on the last latch. "Bears stay in the woods where they belong," she said, her voice neutral but her eyes telling a different story. "It's people you've got to worry about, people who don't know their place." That night, I couldn't sleep. The unfamiliar cricket songs and distant owl hoots kept me alert, my urban ears unaccustomed to nature's nighttime symphony. I lay awake, watching moonlight cast strange shadows across the unfamiliar bedroom. Just as I was finally drifting off, I heard it, a whistle, distant but clear, 3 notes up, 2 notes down. Repeated, a simple melody haunting in its persistence. My first instinct was to go to the window. In the city, sounds had sources, cars, neighbors, sirens. But my hand froze on the curtain as I remembered my grandmother's warning. Instead, I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway to her room. "Grandma," I whispered, pushing her door open. "Someone's whistling outside." She was already awake, sitting upright in bed, her face pale in the moonlight. "Get away from the windows," she said quietly. "And whatever you do, don't answer it." "Answer it? Why would I?" "The whistling man takes people who answer," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Has for generations." The whistling grew louder, now clearly coming from directly beneath my bedroom window. 3 notes up, 2 notes down, a pause, then again. "Is it a ghost?" I asked, my voice small. "Worse," she replied. "It's something that was never human to begin with." She told me then about the town's history, how every generation lost people to the night. Always the curious ones, the ones who looked when they shouldn't, who answered when silence was the only safety. "Back in '54, your great-uncle Marcus heard the whistling, went out to investigate." She sighed, her fingers working the edge of her quilt. "They found his shoes the next morning, sitting neatly by the forest edge. Just his shoes, perfectly placed, like he'd stepped right out of them and walked away." The whistling continued, now moving around the house. First beneath my window, then the kitchen, then the front porch, testing each entry point. "What does it want?" I whispered. "Company," she said simply. "It's lonely out there in the dark." We sat in silence, listening as the whistling circled the house twice more before finally fading into the distance. Only when the night had been silent for a full hour did my grandmother allow me to return to bed, extracting a promise that I would never, under any circumstances, whistle back. For the rest of that summer, I heard the whistling man 3 more times. Each time we followed the same ritual, away from windows, lights off, silent waiting. By August, I had almost grown used to it, this strange midnight visitor who never showed its face. On my last night in town, I packed my bags for the morning flight home. As I folded my last shirt, I absently whistled the tune that had been stuck in my head all summer. 3 notes up, 2 notes down. I froze, horror washing over me as I realized what I'd done. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, from directly outside my window, came an answering whistle. The exact same pattern. I ran to my grandmother's room, but she was already at my door, her face ashen. "What have you done?" she whispered. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat together in the living room, all lights on, as the whistling circled the house continuously until dawn. Sometimes distant, sometimes so close It seemed to be coming from inside the walls themselves. When morning finally came, my grandmother drove me to the airport in silence. At the security checkpoint, she hugged me tightly. "It knows your whistle now," she said. "Be careful in the dark." I laughed it off once I was back in the city. The whistling man was just a local legend, a story to keep kids from wandering in the woods at night. In my apartment, surrounded by the comforting sounds of traffic and neighbors, the Appalachian darkness seemed very far away. But sometimes now, when I'm alone at night, I hear it. 3 notes up, 2 notes down. In the parking garage, outside my bedroom window, once, terrifyingly, from the hallway outside my apartment door. I never answer, I never look. But I know one night, curiosity will get the better of me. Or maybe I'll forget, just for a moment, and whistle that tune without thinking. Sometimes I wonder if that's how it spreads. Not just by taking people, but by making sure the tune stays alive, passed from person to person, generation to generation, a melody that calls through the dark, patient and persistent. I can hear it now as I write this. Getting closer. If you enjoyed this tale of Appalachian folklore, hit the like button, subscribe for more regional legends, and leave a comment sharing a local story from your own hometown. The Navajo elders in my boyfriend's family never spoke directly about the skinwalkers. When the topic came up, they would change the subject or simply walk away. But as an outsider dating a Navajo man, I noticed the subtle signs. The deer skulls mounted above doorways, the juniper branches burned at dusk, the quiet prayers whispered at sundown. "It's just tradition," Aaron would say when I asked. "Nothing to worry about." But I could see the worry in his eyes when I suggested a camping trip in the remote desert landscape where his ancestors had lived for generations. Still, he agreed, perhaps hoping to prove to himself that the stories were just that, stories. We set up camp near a sandstone formation, about 30 miles from the nearest small town in a shallow valley surrounded by twisted juniper trees and sagebrush. The sunset painted the rocks blood red as we built our campfire. "This land is beautiful," I said, watching the flames dance against the gathering darkness. "I can see why your family has such a deep connection to it." Aaron nodded, his gaze fixed on the eastern ridge. "Beautiful," he agreed, "but not always kind." The night was clear, stars emerging in brilliant constellations I'd never seen in the city. As we sat by the fire, Aaron finally opened up about what had been bothering him. "My grandfather used to tell me stories," he began, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire, "about people who gave up their humanity for power, medicine men who went down the wrong path." "Skinwalkers," I said, the word feeling strange in my mouth. Aaron flinched slightly. "We don't say that word out here," he said. "They can hear their name. It draws their attention." He told me how these beings could transform, taking the shape of animals, usually wolves or coyotes, but sometimes owls or crows. How they moved with unnatural speed and could mimic human voices to lure the unwary away from safety. "My grandfather claimed he saw one once," Aaron continued. "Said it came wearing his brother's skin, calling his name from the darkness. But he knew his brother was away hunting. That's what saved him." The fire popped, sending sparks into the night sky. From somewhere in the distance came the howl of a coyote, long and mournful, echoing off the canyon walls. "Just nature," Aaron said, though I noticed how he tossed another branch onto the fire, building it higher. We went to sleep in our tent shortly after, the day's hike having exhausted us. I drifted off to the sound of wind rustling through the juniper branches and Aaron's steady breathing beside me. I woke in total darkness to the sound of my name. "Emma," came the whisper from outside the tent. "Emma, come look at this." It was Aaron's voice, but something about it raised the hairs on my arms. A subtle wrongness in the inflection, like someone trying to speak through unfamiliar lips. "Aaron," I whispered, turning toward where he should be sleeping next to me. He was there, eyes wide open, his hand clamped over his own mouth. Slowly, he shook his head, a warning in his eyes. "Emma," came the voice again, closer now. "Please, I need your help." There was a scratching at the tent fabric, light at first, then more insistent. The zipper of our tent began to move, tooth by tooth, opening from the outside. Aaron reached for the hunting knife he kept in his boot, his movements deliberate and silent. The tent flap peeled back, revealing only darkness beyond, a darkness deeper than the night around us. The smell hit me first, like wet dog fur and something rotten beneath it. Then came a sound I'll never forget, the wet clicking of a mouth opening wider than any human mouth should be able to. "Emma!" No longer a whisper, but a guttural growl that seemed to come from all around us. Aaron moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, slashing outward with the knife while simultaneously pushing me toward the back of the tent. The blade connected with something solid that shouldn't have been there, and a howl of rage split the night air. "Run!" Aaron shouted, cutting through the back of the tent. "Don't look back!" We burst out into the desert night, sprinting toward the car parked about 100 yards away. Behind us, something tore through the remains of our tent with horrible strength. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. Silhouetted against the starlight was a figure both human and not, too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles. It moved in a jerking, disjointed way, like a puppet with tangled strings. Aaron reached the car first, fumbling with the keys as I slammed into the passenger side. The engine roared to life just as the thing reached the hood, slamming its hands, if you could call them hands, against the windshield. In the headlights, I saw its face, or what was trying to be a face, features that shifted and flowed, never quite settling into anything recognizable, except the eyes. The eyes were human and aware and hungry. Aaron floored the accelerator and the creature rolled off the hood. We sped away, tires kicking up dust, heart hammering in my chest. "Don't stop," Aaron kept saying. "Whatever you hear, don't stop." The desert night was filled with sounds as we fled. Howls that became screams that became my name. Called in Aaron's perfect voice, then my mother's voice, then my childhood best friend's voice. We drove straight through until dawn, not stopping until we reached Aaron's family home on the reservation. His grandfather took one look at our faces and knew. Without a word, he began preparing a purification ceremony. "It found you," he said simply. "Now it knows your name, your voice." That was 3 years ago. Aaron and I are married now, living in Seattle, far from the desert. But sometimes when I answer the phone and hear no one on the other end, I wonder. And on nights when the fog rolls in thick from the bay, I hear something moving outside our apartment, something with a gait that's not quite right, calling my name in a voice that's almost but not exactly my husband's. Aaron says it can't follow us this far. The elders performed the ceremony, protected us with prayers and rituals, but he still hangs juniper over our door, and neither of us ever goes out alone after dark. And if you're camping in the desert and hear someone you love calling your name from the darkness, don't answer. It's not them. If you found this story chilling, please like and subscribe for more tales of folklore from cultures around the world. Leave a comment sharing a legend from your own heritage, but maybe don't type out the names of any creatures you wouldn't want to summon. The rules of the midnight game were simple, or so the online forum claimed. Start at 11:55 p.m. Write your full name on a piece of paper and place a drop of your blood beside it. Light a candle. Knock on your own front door 22 times, with the final knock precisely at midnight. Blow out the candle. Congratulations, you've just invited the Midnight Man into your home. "This is so stupid," Megan muttered, scrolling through the instructions on her phone. people actually believe this crap? I shrugged, arranging the candles on my living room table. Probably not, but my cousin swears his roommate's friend tried it and ended up in the hospital. Yeah, and I bet that roommate's friend also saw Bigfoot, she replied, rolling her eyes. Classic friend of a friend urban legend. But she was here anyway, in my apartment on a Friday night, along with Jason and Tyler. We'd been planning to stream horror movies, but somehow ended up discussing internet folklore instead, which led to Tyler challenging us to try the ritual. What's the worst that could happen? Tyler said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. We get scared of our own shadows for a few hours. According to the instructions, once the midnight man entered, participants had to keep their candles lit while wandering through the darkened home until 3:33 a.m. If your candle went out, you had 15 seconds to relight it before the midnight man found you. And what happens if this midnight man catches you? Jason asked, his voice cracking slightly. The forum says he'll rip out your organs and stuff them with salt, I said, trying to keep my tone casual, but only after showing you your greatest fear. The central heating clicked off, leaving the apartment in sudden silence. Outside, a distant roll of thunder suggested an approaching storm. Perfect horror movie weather, Tyler grinned, slicing his thumb with a sterilized safety pin. Let's do this. We all wrote our names, added our blood, and Tyler, ever the dramatic one, took the lead in knocking on my apartment door. 22 evenly spaced knocks, the last one landing precisely as my phone displayed 12 a.m. We lit our candles and began wandering through the apartment. The rules said we couldn't stay in one place, couldn't turn on any lights, and couldn't use flashlights. Only candles to guide our way. I feel ridiculous, Megan whispered as we separated, each taking different paths through my now unfamiliar apartment. The first hour passed without incident. We occasionally crossed paths, exchanging nervous smiles that became progressively more relaxed as nothing happened. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows, but inside was just my regular apartment, filled with familiar furniture and ordinary shadows. At 1:17 a.m., the temperature dropped. Not gradually, but in an instant, like walking from summer into a freezer. My breath fogged in front of my face, and the candle flame flickered violently. "Guys!" I called out, my voice sounding flat and muffled in the suddenly dense air. "Is it cold by you too?" No one answered. I rounded the corner into the kitchen where Tyler should have been, but found it empty. The only sound was the soft hiss of my candle and the distant rumble of thunder. As I turned to leave, something caught my attention, a dark smudge on the kitchen floor like a footprint. Not a human footprint, but something elongated and narrow with what looked like too many toes. It glistened slightly in the candlelight, wet as if recently made. I backed away, heart hammering against my ribs. "Tyler!" I called again, louder this time. "Jason!" "Megan!" The apartment remained silent. I moved toward the living room where we had started, hoping to find the others there. The candle flame bent sideways despite there being no draft, pointing down the hallway toward the bedrooms. A soft thud came from my bedroom, like something heavy falling onto carpet. I hesitated, then forced myself to move toward it. The rules said we couldn't stay in one place. We had to keep moving. The bedroom door was closed. I was certain I'd left all doors open before we started. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob, the brass ice cold against my skin. Inside, the room was empty but different. The furniture was all in the right places, but something about the proportions seemed wrong. The bed slightly too long, the ceiling just a bit too high. And there were more shadows than there should have been, pooling in corners where no object was casting them. A whisper came from behind me, so close I could feel breath on my neck. "Behind you." I whirled around, but the doorway was empty. The candle flame surged, then died, plunging me into darkness. 15 seconds to relight it. I fumbled with the lighter in my pocket, fingers suddenly clumsy with fear. 1, 2, 3. The darkness around me seemed to deepen, to gain substance. 8, 9, 10. Something moved in the corner of my vision, a tall, thin shape unfolding itself from the shadows beside my dresser. 13, 14. The lighter sparked, caught. The candle reignited with a whoosh that seemed too loud in the silent room. The corner where I'd seen movement was empty, but on the wall beside it something had been written, or rather, carved directly into the plaster. Fresh gouges that spelled out, "Found you." I ran. Forget the rules. I sprinted back toward the living room, calling for the others. My candle went out again, but I didn't care. I just needed to find my friends, to make sure they were okay. The living room was empty, our phones and bags still on the coffee table where we'd left them. But the front door stood open, revealing the dark hallway of my apartment building beyond. I didn't remember anyone opening it. According to the rules, the door should have remained closed until 3:33 a.m. "Guys," my voice echoed strangely in the empty apartment. "This isn't funny." A sound came from behind the couch, a wet, sliding sound, like something damp being dragged across the floor. I edged forward, candle forgotten in my hand, and peered over the back of the couch. Nothing there. But the sound continued, now coming from the kitchen. I turned slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get out of the apartment. The kitchen was dark, but I could make out a shape on the floor, someone lying there, curled into a fetal position. Relief flooded through me. "Tyler, are you okay?" The figure didn't respond. I stepped closer, fumbling for the lighter again. As the flame caught, illuminating the kitchen, I realized what I was seeing wasn't Tyler at all. It was something else, something wearing what looked like a rain-slicked garbage bag, its form constantly shifting beneath the plastic. It raised what might have been a head, the plastic stretching to reveal the impression of a face, pressing from within. All wrong angles and too many features. The lighter fell from my hand as I backed away. The thing on the floor unfolded itself, rising to a height that forced it to stoop beneath my kitchen ceiling. Its movements were jerky, disjointed like a video playing at the wrong frame rate. I ran for the front door, but it slammed shut as I approached. The temperature plummeted further, frost forming on the walls. Behind me, wet footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. The game isn't over. The voice wasn't coming from the thing behind me. It seemed to originate from everywhere at once, vibrating through the floorboards. "You have to keep playing until 3:33. A candle appeared in my hand, lit, the flame steady despite my trembling. The apartment was different now, the hallway stretching impossibly long, doors appearing where there shouldn't be any. "Where are my friends?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. "Playing," came the reply, "each in their own game." I walked because I had no choice. The thing behind me remained at a constant distance, never quite catching up, but never falling behind. Sometimes I glimpsed it reflected in windows or mirrors, its shape constantly changing, always wrong in ways I couldn't quite define. The apartment became a labyrinth of familiar rooms in impossible arrangements. I'd enter my bedroom and exit into the kitchen. Hallways stretched and contracted. Doors led to places that couldn't exist within the building's footprint. At 3:32 a.m., according to my watch, I found myself back in the living room. The candle had burned down to almost nothing. The others were there, each sitting perfectly still, staring at nothing with glazed eyes. "Guys," I whispered. None of them moved. As my watch ticked over to 3:33, all the candles went out simultaneously. Darkness rushed in, absolute and complete. For a moment, I felt something brush against my face, cold, damp, with the texture of wet leather. Then the lights came on. My apartment was normal again. My friends blinked, looking around in confusion. "Did we fall asleep?" Megan asked, yawning. "Some ghost hunters we are." "I had the weirdest dream," Tyler said, stretching. "Something about doors that led to the wrong places." Jason nodded, rubbing his eyes. "I dreamt I was lost in a maze version of this apartment. Crazy how we all dozed off at the same time. They didn't remember. Or they were choosing not to remember. I almost convinced myself it had been a collective hallucination, some shared sleep paralysis brought on by suggestion and the late hour. Almost. But that night, after everyone left, I found wet footprints in my kitchen that dried to reveal a strange salt-like residue, and in my bedroom, gouged into the wall behind a poster I'd hung years ago, were the words, "Found you." Sometimes, late at night, I still hear knocking, 22 slow, deliberate knocks. And sometimes, when I check my phone at night, it's 3:33 a.m., no matter what time it was moments before. I don't think the game ever really ends. I think once you invite the Midnight Man in, a part of him stays forever, waiting for you to play again. If you found this story chilling, please like and subscribe for more urban legends, and leave a comment sharing any late-night games or rituals you've heard of, but maybe think twice before trying them yourself.